Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast Magic is Real. I'm your host, Shannon, and I'm here today with Lelanea Fulton. She is a transcendental coach, which I will have Lelanea explain what that means. And Lelanea is a unity conscious experiencer. I'll also have her explain that to you. I'm very happy to have her on the show today to share her spiritual journey, the work that she does, her spiritual experiences. I am just so honored to have her here. And if you do like this podcast, I'd just be so grateful if you haven't subscribed yet, if you would, and like the video, comment, even if it's just a little heart. It helps so much with the algorithm. That's my tiny little pitch about how to help support the podcast for free. With that said, thank you so much for being here, Lalania. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to express my gratitude. I mentioned it earlier to you, but I want to say it again. Thank you for producing content that is not designed to create or activate the nervous system, that is not based on sensationalism, that is not based on propaganda, but is really staying in alignment with neutrality and truth, and just allowing the human experience and wisdom to be enough to bring people together. So thank you for really keeping things clean.
That is so beautifully stated. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for seeing what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do here and for participating. I would love to start just, I want to kind of learn about you. I want to talk about your work. What led you into the work that you're doing now? And actually, let's start with that, just so that we understand when
Mhm.
you say transcendental coach, what does that mean to you? And how do you serve your clients? We'll start there.
Mm. So transcendental coaching. Um, and bear with me, I'm a little raspy today.
So am I.
Um, just chalk it up to sex appeal.
Yes.
Um, so, transcendental coaching is really built on the foundation of doing the inner work and participating in the greater consciousness that exists around us. So, this is about eliminating and deprogramming the belief systems that have been inherited or that has been uploaded essentially without our permission throughout these formable years within our lives when we're most programmable. Right. So we're looking at in the embryonic stage all the way up to 8, 9, 10 years old. We're in these very highly suggestible states. So we're in the theta brainwave, which is essentially a hypnotic state. And this is where our society, our government, our family systems, this is where our culture, pop culture, and whatever's happening in tech, whatever's happening in Hollywood is really programming us based off of what we're exposed to. Even what's happening in the economy affects us at this age. This is all uploading or this is all programming. And so transcendental coaching is really supporting people through the inner work of recognizing what that programming is, being able to highlight it, and then being able to become the architect of your reality by consciously choosing what programming it is that remains, and then what you're going to swap out. And so this is about truly, as I said before, becoming an architect of your own reality rather than living life through the subconscious, which is the programmed aspect, or living unconsciously, which we can see you the more that you lean into the inner work and transcendental work, the more that you start to realize that the majority of people around you are just reacting. They're reacting to everything around them that they perceive as a threat. They're reacting to one another. They're projecting, they're deflecting, they're doing whatever they can do to protect the ego at a high level. And this isn't where conscious communication is. This isn't where conscious relationships are. This isn't even where conscious creation is. This is what it is to be in the Maya, to be deeply asleep. And this is where suffering resides. And so transcendental work is really empowering an individual to participate in this particular incarnate at a high level.
Again, so beautifully stated. Why do people come to you typically? I know it could be a million different things, but what is it that draws people to doing this work?
Mm, that's a great question. And I do get all walks of life. I get all ages. My favorite is to work with parents who are wanting to raise their children more consciously, and also teens in their later years and in like 13, 14, 15, that parents will bring with the intention to support their children in becoming more conscious, and in uh, having relationships at deeper levels and becoming even more resourced, right? I also get a lot of people who are going through what they perceive as the midlife crisis, which is actually for many spiritual awakenings. So I believe it was Carl Jung that mentioned that you don't really truly live life authentically until 40 years of age and after. And I can attest to that personally, and I'm seeing that all around me. A lot of people who think it's a midlife crisis, there's something wrong with them, are really leaning into the human experience, and then also the white coat syndrome of, Western psychology and Western pharmaceuticals. And when they start working with me or someone else that's doing this type of work, they start to understand that they're exactly where they're supposed to be, that they are um, having an egoic death, that they are in the process of grieving a part of themselves that is dying away. And it is an incredibly beautiful process that is really freeing them to live the next part of their life exactly how they want to live rather than how they're told to live.
Mm,
Um, I get a lot of people that come to me because I do a lot of ICF work, coaching work, the International Coaching Federation. And so that type of coaching style is really to support entrepreneurs, business professionals, a lot of people within corporations that are trying to become more strategic, climb the ladder, and cross milestones. And then when I get those individuals in, we start to realize that the problem exists on a more spiritual level. And so those individuals end up spending much more time with me than they thought. And we go much deeper into so many beautiful different layers of who they are, the complex human being, and then the spiritual being that's really emerging. So
yeah.
it's very diverse. And also something that I'd like to mention, 53% of my clients are men.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very valuable information to hear because it really pushes back on a stereotype, a perception, and disinformation that I believe supports us in taking a step back and, maybe eliminating the pointing finger, the finger pointing. It's just,
Yeah.
it's
That,
not
yeah,
necessary.
I agree. I keep saying that men, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, I mean it in a supportive way, that men
Mhm.
need help because
Yeah.
women do too for our own reasons.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
we tend to come together in community when we're having a hard time. We tend to reach out for help. We have our, at
Mhm.
least not all of us, but I notice this in my own community and myself when
Mhm.
I have my women, I have my
Mhm.
tribe, and
Mhm.
often men are discouraged from showing
Yeah.
showing that kind of vulnerability, or they
Yeah.
were in another, whatever it is, in another
Mhm.
time period. So I love that. Thank you for mentioning that.
Mhm.
And yeah, and also wanted to attest to the life has only for me gotten better after 40 every single
Mhm.
year, continuing on. It just keeps getting better and better for the same
Mhm.
exact reasons that you mentioned. Finding the flow, finding, oh,
Mhm.
these things didn't work. So I'm staying away from those. And now I can kind of
Mhm.
swim an easier path. So I love that you said that
Mhm.
because I think on the topic of quote unquote death that people fear,
Mhm.
as we get closer to that
Mhm.
time, we're like, oh my God, it's almost over. It's all going away. But in fact,
Mhm.
I found it's only increasing in joy and abundance and prosperity and flow.
Mhm.
So I love that you said that. So I would love to know too, kind of about your spiritual background. I know that you had what you call a unity consciousness experience, and I love that the way that you word
Mhm.
that. Um, I know you were only 6 or 7 when this happened,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I wouldn't imagine you necessarily had a sense of spirituality. But what was your upbringing like in that sense?
So my mother, atheist, her parents agnostic, and then my father was raised Catholic. He was an altar boy when he was very young, and he's Cuban, Puerto Rican, and so this very Catholic, Latino upbringing. And that was never brought over from his side of the family. We didn't even learn Spanish. And we definitely didn't have any relationship with his Catholic past. And so I would say that my family that I incarnated, that I chose to incarnate into, was leaning more science and materialism. And I would say still today, they operate from a very materialistic standpoint and reductionistic standpoint when it or perception of the world.
Yeah. Can you share about your unity consciousness experience? And I believe this
Mhm.
may not have been, I know this isn't the only one
Mhm.
you've experienced, but I would just love to hear sort of your journey. Always sounds so corny, but it is, it's a journey. And so just
Mhm.
kind of like however you want to tell it, just how this all came about for you and how you found, how you discovered this, who you really are.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, unity consciousness is something that I've encountered in multiple different times of my life, and it has different expressions, and it has a different feel. And then what is obtained through the experience is different based on the experience or the time in my life when I'm having the experience. So, the first time I had the experience was in a near death. It was a drowning. Um, my heartbeat did not stop, thus the near death. I did not need to be fully resuscitated. Um, Thus it being called a near death experience. Um, I was in the drowning process. I was 6 or 7 and went to a particular swimming hole that I had gone to numerous. Oops, sorry, something just fell over. Um, I'd gone to a swimming hole that we had gone to for quite a few years, and it was out in the countryside, and it had a bed of sand, and then in the center of this small lake was a dock that you could swim out to, and then you'd run and do flips off the dock. Um, and this particular moment in my life, I started to explore comparison, and I don't even know if I was in kindergarten yet or if I was about to start kindergarten. Um, but I remember seeing a girl who was my size and I sized her up. And I thought, well, if she can jump off this particular end, then I'm going to. I had a routine. I always jumped off the same side, which took me closer back to the shore where the water was shallow. I only knew how to doggy paddle. So I sized her up. I compared our ages and our heights, and I decided to jump off the side that she did. I didn't know that she knew how to swim. So the distance between the water and the bed of the lake had a greater distance. And I didn't take deep enough of a breath. And I found myself going through the process of trying to push myself off of the floor of the lake all the way up to the water to catch a breath while simultaneously screaming for help. And I tried this method a couple times and realized very quickly that it didn't work. You either had to breathe or you had to scream. And so breath became the priority. And I quickly came up with this method, this strategy of raising my arm above water. And from I would say above the elbow, like closer to the wrist, I could get maybe about, half a foot of my arm out of the water, and I could shake my hand back and forth, trying to get the attention of an adult. And so this lake was quite small, which means that there was only a few families there. There was about 5 or 6 families. And then also the way that the parking system was is that there was a gravel lot right near where everyone's blankets were. And I would say it was probably about 200 feet from the blankets. And the way the parking lot was very small, so you knew who was coming in because a lot of people were double parked. So you kind of paid attention to who was leaving and then going to their cars, because then everyone had to figure out, is this person, am I parked behind them or are they parked behind me? And so you were very aware of your surroundings there. There was also a lifeguard, which we were always parked right underneath the lifeguard in terms of our blanket and our setup. And so here I am waving my hand above the water. There's only a few families, so it's not like I'm, hidden from all the bodies, but there are quite a few bodies paddling around in the water, and they're majority kids. And I'm watching them paddle around me, doggy paddling, and the bubbles coming from up to the surface from them smacking their hands in the water. And it's at this particular point that things start to slow down for me. And I'm moving at a certain point. I start moving between my physical body and above the water. So I'm changing POVs, perspectives, and I'm able to witness my mother start to panic because she can't see me. And so she's standing up and she's got her hand and she's scanning the water and she's looking for me and she's yelling my name and she can't see me. So now she's going into fight or flight. She's becoming very activated and I'm feeling all of it. Feeling it and I'm seeing it. I'm feeling her fear. And at this point, I start to come to a place of surrender. So as I'm observing and feeling her fear, I'm recognizing it's her own because I'm no longer feeling that fear of death. And I'm no longer going through that very primal stage of like trying to survive. I'm now entering into a place of surrender. And with surrender comes a sense of calm and peace. And I'm spending more time on the bottom of the floor than I am trying to move above the water. And time shifts and changes in this particular space. And I heard a voice audibly outside of myself, telepathically, I hear, "What would you like to do?" And my response was, I didn't even have to respond in sentence form. I didn't have to justify or elaborate. My response was, she wouldn't understand. It would destroy her. And I'm shifting between POVs and observing her and seeing her in action. So I also don't recall if this was directly after my uncle, her oldest brother, who she was closest to, had just passed or he was about to pass. But he would end up having a heart attack in her arms and breathing his last breath into her face. And I think it's before that had happened, um, before that event were to happen. And I just remember it would destroy her. She wouldn't be able to handle it. So, with that statement, that response, it was a choice to stay. And it's during that time, right before that telepathic communication happens, that I drop into, as I'm surrendering, this place of unity consciousness. And what that means is I start to merge with all aspects of my surrounding. I am the water. I am the sun that is breaking the crust of the water. And I am the particles of the sand that are being moved from the floor in this dance like motion slowly. And then they're hitting the light as it breaks through this amber colored lake. And then the sand is shooting these fragments of light all through the water. and the motion of the movements of people around me are slow and beautiful, and everything is beautiful, and I'm sitting in a place of bliss and love, which is in contrast from what I'm observing above me outside of the water. And that's where surrender exists, right? And I recognize that everything is beautiful, that this whole human experience is beautiful, that even the dying process is beautiful. The act of surrendering is beautiful. And everything is perfect exactly the way that it is. And in this place, I had so much gratitude for the life, the 6 years that I got to be here, that even if I were to transition out, that still this was amazing. I have so much gratitude. And it was in this space of unity consciousness of love that that conversation happened. And then I made the decision. And then quickly I moved out of that space. And then I see a woman shifting her hips towards me with a beautiful long braid that's hanging down her back. And her hair is beautifully just swaying along the surface of the water. And I just remember finding that so incredibly beautiful. And I'm watching her move towards me, and her hair is swaying, and she's in this white kind of old vintage style bathing suit. And then she picks me up and hoists me out of the water. And I hadn't taken my first breath yet. There's almost like it feels like 15 minutes of that space, but time is different in this space. And there's just, it feels like this lull, this incredible space, this liminal space that I'm sitting in before I actually take my breath. And so I'm still shifting between the body and above the body. And so this woman's back is towards my mom, and I can see my mother catch a glimpse of me and begin running across the water, almost like she's on top of it, but she's running through the water. And then the woman's kind of shifting around and she grabs me. And that's when the first breath hit, and I'm back in my body, and it's so sharp, and there's so much pressure, and it's so heavy and dense. And I get that first breath. And my mother takes me back to the shore and onto the blanket, and is helping me get express all the water out of my lungs, helping me get, essentially I'm going back into my body. I'm shifting back into my body. And after we spend a little bit of time of, checking my vitals, making sure I'm all right, it's like, all right, well, it's time to go. Let's go thank the woman that saved you, which I've always said, isn't it a bit odd that this woman didn't just pop by the blanket and is like, how's she doing? That had to be really scary. No one came by. No one said, hey, is your daughter okay? We just saw the event that just happened. Nothing. The lifeguard that was above us wasn't like, hey, do
Right.
you need me to give her mouth to mouth? Like, what's going on? He didn't even come down to check my vitals. That's a person that's trained, right? It's as if nobody saw anything. And so my mom asked for the description. Lalania, do you remember what the woman looked like? Do you remember what she was wearing? And so I described the long braid and the white bathing suit because that's all I knew. I didn't see her face, anything above the torso. So my mother starts going from family to family. I'm looking for this woman that just saved my daughter's life. She pulled her out of the water. My daughter says she was wearing this, that she had a long braid hair. No one knew of the woman. No one saw anything. And my mom's like, well, did you have to let anyone out? Like, did anyone move? Did anyone, need to get in their cars or anything? No. It's as if it never happened. And so it became
Right.
a running joke that I had like a guardian angel. And what a beautiful concept of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Us all having guardian angels or guides. So, yeah, that was the experience, the first experience of unity consciousness, which then from that point on, these moments of high bliss and love and gratitude and merging with that which is around me and seeing no separation would occur in micro moments, specifically in nature. And then I would have two large ones. I ended up having one in New York City subway train station. And I had another one crossing the border between Vancouver, British Columbia and Washington State. And that was probably the most epic, with information in audibly hearing a voice outside of myself, and then time space actually changing and shifting. And this is in broad daylight, not in a drowning experience. So then you can't chalk it up to not enough oxygen in the bloodstream, so you're hallucinating, which is the process, right? To try to explain this away, I came up with every scientific explanation that I possibly could come up with to try to understand this. Because I didn't come out of this going, well, that's unity consciousness,
Right.
and this happened and that happened, but instead trying to rationalize it, trying to judge it, trying to explain the mystery away, which we do in everyday life. There's so much beauty and mystery around us. And yet, the more we lean into the human experience and what we've been told in the whole Newtonian reductionist concept of material science, the more we try to eradicate the beauty and the mystery of what it is to be a soul having a human experience.
Yeah. That's really, really profound. And I do wonder if you understand or what you think in terms of, did you have these later unity consciousness experiences that were out of body, um, because your soul had already had this NDE,
Mhm.
as we would call it, and so your soul remembered kind of the other side? Do you have an idea of why you were shown these things again and again? Or was it just that now
Mhm.
you were sort of shifted into another state where now it's impossible to forget?
I think that is a really beautiful question. And it is a question that I would play with over and over. And there's an innate understanding for me that in that time when I was playing between dimensions, right? Um, Leaving my body, being able to observe outside of the water, entering into oneness, being able to communicate telepathically with someone outside of myself, right? And I feel like that opened a portal or created a shift that then created a lot of curiosity for me. So I remember my siblings were having a really hard time at particular ages, especially after witnessing my uncle pass, because all three of us were watching when it happened, which is why I believe it happened after this drowning experience, because I remember them grappling with like, well, we're just going to die and it's just going to go dark. And they just had this really limited understanding. And I remember I had absolutely no fear of death. I never saw it as dying, I saw it as transitioning, because I had this experience that almost left this knowing. And remember thinking it's just as traumatic to be born as it is to transition outward. Like, these are both traumatic, can feel like
Yeah.
traumatic events. And I remember thinking if I had fully drowned, it didn't seem that traumatic at all. Like, it was just going to be a graceful transition. Once I moved past that primal state of trying to survive, when I came into the place of surrender, I was like, okay, well, we can do this. Like, I'm ready. I can transition out. And I even harbored some resentment for my mother in my early teens because I stayed for her rather than going back home. And so I remember being resentful and just being like, I could have gone back home. And so that's all innate. That was never learned. That was all something that just was moving within me. And so when I would have these tremors of unity consciousness, which after the NDE, none of the other ones did I exit my body. But what I describe it as is moving densities or dimensions within the self.
Mm.
So it's changing densities and the frequency of the vibration shifting and changing, and which creates a very different perspective of external reality. And then also senses being able to open up, becoming clairs, becoming very sensitive, being able to audibly hear and being able to visually see what others were not seeing. And I believe that is a byproduct of the drowning, the NDE, that it had opened something that, like, once it's opened, it's very hard to close it. And that's something that is a big part of the work that I do with people. A lot of people will start having, through the work, the inner work, start having these huge shifts of waking up and going, oh my God, I can't believe I used to experience the world this particular way. Or, oh my God, I can't believe I used to like see myself this way or see reality or just experience things in this particular way. And I'm terrified now that I can see more clearly that the veil has been lifted or that the lens has been swapped out, the filter has been changed. I'm terrified that I'm going to go back to that. And the thing is once these open, there is no going back. You might fall back into some habitual behaviors, but now you're very aware of it. You can observe and see yourself differently within that space. And that was the same situation here. Is once I had been privy to this new experience, now it was easy to evoke it and invoke it because I knew it was there. It doesn't go away.
Mhm. And when it happened, the other 2 times when it happened, I would assume it wasn't necessarily something you invoked on purpose, it just kind of came in, and how did you experience that?
Mm. So I wish I could figure out how to invoke it
Yeah.
intentionally. But I also recognize that I would probably be in that space more than I would be in this space. And that's not what I'm here for. Um, and so the little tremors that started happening throughout my teens of this experience, I was able to I was able to play with it through techniques. I would sit in nature and I would do what I would call merging. And it was where the space between myself and the trees, the treetops, nature, um, sit in a field of wildflowers where everything started to move and become one. There was no space between myself and them. And so the exterior of who I am started to dissolve. And I started to be able to see energy move throughout myself and them and everything around me. And I really started, it wasn't philosophical, it became a remembering that I am that very consciousness that moves throughout the trees and the birds and the beautiful flowers and the weeds, all of that. I'm the same energy. I'm just participating in a different vibration, a different frequency of vibration. And so that those little exercises really, I believe, were building up to something bigger. And so in the subway, the L train, we were moving between, I lived in Greenpoint at the time. So we were moving between Brooklyn and Manhattan. And you go underwater through a tunnel. And there's this like, gosh, I want to say, is it like 12 minutes of space of movement, really jerky movement. And I was reading a book and I remember I was like trying to keep my place, like, the car's really jerking us around. And I'm keeping my place and I'm reading it. And it's the Celestine Prophecy, but it's the experiential guide, which is like the fourth or fifth book into the Celestine Prophecy and James Redfield's work. And I remember reading something that provoked a ginormous shift. And at this time, I had a really tumultuous childhood. There is diagnosed sociopathy that moves through the family lines. There's narcissism at a high level. It's not just a buzzword, like, but really high level narcissism and borderline personality disorders. And There's a lot. There's intergenerational energy there, and it was very traumatic and very painful. And I was estranged from my parents, and I was reading a passage in there about how to actually perceive your parents no longer as though they are your parents, but actually introducing the idea of individuals that you've incarnated into or through in order to access certain experiences. And so that's this for the first time is bringing this concept to me that's resonated at a high level. I was like, oh, yeah. Like I already knew this, but this is reminding me of something I already knew that I didn't know I knew. And it was that shift that all of a sudden it was a new perspective. And I looked up from the book, and the whole car was completely illuminated, so bright, like a really bright light. And then there was light moving from inside of individuals, like they were bright, not just because there was a light shining on them, but there was light moving out of them. And they all had smiles on their face. Anyone who's lived in New York knows that there's no way in hell that you would be in a subway car and everyone would be illuminated with smiles on their face. Like that just does not go down in New York. And so all these people are smiling and they're all very quiet. And and I remember feeling a high level of love and bliss and gratitude. And I'm just watching this light. And I'm just thinking, holy shit, this is a good book. Like this, everyone should read this book. This is amazing. Didn't
Yeah.
even occur to me that I was having another experience. I mean, I knew that this was not normal. I knew that this was something different, but I didn't have, I was like maybe 26, 27. I didn't have the wisdom, the knowledge, or even a community to support me to help me understand what that experience was.
Yeah. It's like the book or what you were reading in the book reminded your soul what's really going on, and so you
Mhm,
tapped into that dimension. It's just
mhm,
through being conscious of it, and that's
mhm,
why this podcast is called Magic is Real, because once you tap into the
mhm,
dimension, even if it's not that profound all the time, you
mhm.
start to realize that all of these things that you were told were fantasy are actually real.
Yes.
And that's like changed my whole way of looking at the world.
Yes.
Like I'll still,
Because,
yeah, you still
yeah.
get stressed or whatever, but like, yeah, tell me what you were going to say.
Well, I just say it sounds like you shifted your perspective and
Yeah.
that you chose the reality you wanted to participate in. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you completely remove yourself from the material human experience. It doesn't mean that you're not participating in the third density. You're here, you're having a very human experience that you signed up for. But it also means that you're shifting your perspective and you're teaching your brain to look for the things that you want to align with.
Hmm.
So if you believe that everyone around you is out to get you, if you suffer from paranoia, then you will find so many reasons to be paranoid all around you. You'll
Hmm.
be able to see it. You're hyper fixated, you're looking for it. You've taught your brain through the belief system to be hyper focused to seek out possible threats. And if you believe that the world is magic and that it's beautiful and that there's so much mysticism and mystery and beauty all around us, you'll see it. You'll see the good in people. You'll see the beauty. You'll see opportunities and experiences that continue to compound that belief system.
Hmm. It's what you believe is what you will see. That's so
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. And then you had this other experience where it happened again. Was it similar to the first time? Did you have any more revelations, or was it more of just a state of being that you were in?
So those are all very good questions. This was huge. This was huge. And this also, I would say, gosh, I really have to think about it for a minute, but it completely changed my trajectory. It changed me. It blew me open. and I was already blown open. So I ended up having, in my early 40s, I ended up having a three personal experiences that happened in my love life, my friendship life, and my career life. All three blew up within 2 weeks at like such a painful level of being abandoned by my employer who I just signed on to. And, we went through quite a bit of interviews and processes to get there. And then, there's essentially a verbal contract. There's a lot. I was in a niche world at that time. And then there was a friendship of 4 years. She was my closest friend, and I moved near her. And then there was a partnership. I had just gotten married, and we were 2 months in, and my husband ghosted me. He lived in another country, and we were in the process of moving me over. So there's these three things that compounded that created what at the time I thought was, I'm like, is this a midlife crisis? What the hell is this? Like, this was so incredibly painful. And I didn't have answers for any of it. Not all three individuals essentially abandoned or ghosted and didn't have a reason, didn't want to communicate about it. And it was almost an act of war to try to be like, what is happening? And I ended up going through what is called an egoic death. And I started to move away from my ego, and the ego was dying. And I had had many shifts prior that I wasn't in alignment with my community. I wasn't in alignment with my purpose through the communities that I was participating in, and then the work life I was participating in, and how I was living my life. I wasn't in alignment. I wasn't authentic. This wasn't where I was supposed to be. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And so there was many tremors of, this is not the road you're supposed to be on, move off. And I wasn't listening. I was anchoring in. I was very like goal oriented. I wasn't paying any attention to any of the signs. So the universe is like, okay, we'll give you a sign you can't miss. So all three major areas of my life completely um, went up in flames. And so now it's like, now you have to sit and look at this. And what's interesting is I actually set myself up almost as though my future self set myself up for this. I was in one of the most beautiful homes that was next to one of the most beautiful and least um, manipulated parks in Portland, Oregon. So it was a true forest that had these gorgeous old growth, cedar old growths. And I spent a lot of time in this forest. And I was able to not work for about a year. And so I stayed in my beautiful home, and I just grieved, and I sat with myself, and I spent more time just shifting away from my ego and leaning more into my soul, where I started spending more time in doing the inner work, and I started spending more time in meditation and breath work, and just really becoming more in love and more in relationship with myself, and really working through my values and who I was showing up as a human being in this human experience. And it was this time that I kept asking and kept praying, help me remember who I am. Help me remember who I am. Why am I here? Why is this happening? And I ended up doing this for about 8 months. And there was like maybe the first 3 months, I didn't even identify with Lalania. I didn't identify with her name. I was in the wine industry. I stopped, had absolutely no interest in drinking. I didn't want to participate in anything that she did. I felt I was distancing myself from my social group. There was just, everything was falling away from me. And I ended up going up to Vancouver, British Columbia, where I've been very attracted to that. And I didn't know why I was so attracted to BC, but there was something that kept saying, like, go there, go there, go there. And I had a friend up there and I spent a couple days. And as I was going through the border, going back into the US, I was sitting in my car. And by this time, I remember in BC for the first time I was visiting a rose garden. And for the first time I was smiling and laughing. And I hadn't smiled and laughed for months. And it felt like I was remembering myself. And I'm in the car and I remember hearing some kind of like angry, aggressive, loud, like grunge music. Um, and I became judgmental because I'm in my car and we're incrementally moving inch by inch. There's a lot of traffic to get through the border crossing. And you're surrounded by this gorgeous park. And there's people picnicking and grilling on both sides. And it's just this really gorgeous park. And there's about 4 or 5 lanes of cars. And I have the windows down. It's a summer day. And I pull out my book, The Gene Keys, and I just started reading this book and I have it on the steering wheel. And I think I'm on the second or the third gene key. And I hear that really loud, aggressive music. And I keep looking around and looking for the car because I wanted to judge them. I was judging them already, but I wanted to see them and judge them. And finally, they kind of get up close to me. They're next to me. And I'm like, oh, there they are. Who are these people that are listening to this really aggressive, angry music where it's just yelling? And I look over at the car and I've got this side look and I'm rolling up my windows and just staring at them as the windows are going up. And it's just scorn, right? And I go back to reading the book and I've got my music going on. I got my dog in the back seat and I go back to reading the book and I finish that particular paragraph. And I look up and the people are still next to me. And I remember looking at them and they're all kind of subdued. They're very quiet, they're low energy. And I remember thinking, wow, they're not really, their behavior is not a match for the music. It's so wild. And I hear a voice that says, Lalania, and it's outside of myself. And every time I've heard this voice outside of myself, it usually says my name, Lalania. Do not judge them, for they are you. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, I bet I would like them. I bet I would actually really have a good time with them. I'm sure I would like them. And I go through this process of kind of trying to remove this belief system of that, that they're these horrible people because they listen to music that I'm not participating in. And as I'm staring at them and kind of observing them, the car starts to move forward in their lane. And I'm seeing on the other side of them, there's these two kids playing football and two little boys. And they look like they're like 7, 8, 9. And they're throwing a football back and forth. And they're playing under a tree. And I start to notice that the leaves of the tree are starting to blow in this very like slow mannerism. So things are slowing down. And I'm looking at the trees and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on with these leaves? And for a moment, I'm like, what the hell's going on with me? Why is everything look so like everything's slowing in this really wild movement? And for a brief moment, I even was like, I didn't accidentally eat like a gummy or something, right? I didn't eat something laced. And I'm like, no, like I'm thinking, retracing my steps, and I'm like, no. And I'm looking at the tree and then I'm looking at the boys, and the boys, their movement are slowing down, but they're smiling so big and they're so ecstatic. And now I'm feeling them and I'm feeling like their laughter and their play as if I'm actually playing with them. And I start to even like trace this feeling back to when I've played football, in the past as a kid, throwing a ball around. And I'm starting to like link that energy back to my past, but also still be present in this energy with these two boys. And I'm almost like giggling and laughing like I'm playing with them. And everything's moving so slow. And even their movement as they're running is really slow. And I'm starting to go like, what the hell is happening? And I'm in this state of love and bliss. And I'm following these boys and I'm moving to the next set of scenery, which is, I think, the family that they might be with are having a grill out. And I'm looking at all the faces and everyone's smiling and light is coming from inside of them outward. And their eyes are so bright. Everything's just illuminated, sharp, clear, crystal. Like it's gorgeous. And I'm slowly in awe, making my way, panning the whole right side of my car out the window. And then when I get to the point where I can't go any further, I now look to my left and I see these families, and there's these different cultural families that are walking around and looking at the statues. There's quite a few statues in the park, and they're reading the plaques, like historical plaques, and I can feel the love and gratitude that this father has for his daughter and his wife who are with him. And I feel like they're Indian. They were wearing um classic Indian garments. And I just remember thinking how incredibly beautiful they were. And I could feel the pride and I could feel the love that this man had for his wife and his daughter. And I'm just slowly watching how he's moving and swaying and how the daughter and the mother are holding hands. And then I moved to the next family, which is another um, ethnic family of a different background, and I'm observing them, and there's quite a few kids in this particular family, and I'm just observing them, and I'm in such love and in such gratitude that I'm sobbing, but I don't know that I am, because I'm not out of my body, but I'm not connected to my body, so I can't feel it, but I know that I'm in such a high state of love and bliss. And so I keep moving. And now all of a sudden, as I'm staring at this family, I see the boys run past and the football in the air. And so now they're on this side of the park throwing the football. And now my eyesight goes to them and I'm following them. And then they run past a bunch of high reeds or tall grass. And I'm seeing the grass move in the wind. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is so incredibly beautiful. How lucky do I get to see this? I get to be here. I don't even know where here is, but this is phenomenal. And so I'm watching the grass move. And it's at this point that I start seeing a thread of light that's moving. And so it's conscious energy that's moving between the trees, the boys, the people, the grass. And I'm seeing it come back to myself. And it's at this point where I feel like I'm at the highest point of this experience that I could be at. I don't know how the hell I'm staying in my body because my vibration is the frequency is so high, and I'm sobbing and I'm in love and I'm grinning from ear to ear. And I'm seeing myself merging with all of these different people having their experience and emotionally connecting to them and recognizing that through emotions, I actually get to experience each person. And then it's in this space that I start hearing information and I start reciting it out loud as if if I hear my own self saying it, then I'm solidifying it. And it's almost as though I'm trying not to forget it. So I say it out loud. So I'm repeating what I'm telepathically hearing. And what I hear is that um, these people and yourself are fragments of source, and you are here. You're all the same individual, broken into fragments that have different experiences. And it's through these different experiences that ultimately source is learning about itself. And through these different experiences, emotionally, when you connect to another person and you're sharing empathically in that emotion, you're actually experiencing that person's life. So we're here to have all these experiences, but the wisdom and what we take from it is the emotional aspect of it. So when I was younger, people used to ask me what I wanted to be, and I would say, I'm here to have as many experiences as possible. And so now in this moment, hearing this, I'm recognizing that as a child, I remembered why I was here. So I'm recognizing that emotionally connecting with all these people and merging means that I'm almost living them, experiencing their human avatar. And I began to um, receive more information that is more along the lines of source energy, fragmentation, and then I have this huge moment where I am able to remember that I am source, but I'm source remembering that they're source.
Mm.
And I even heard myself say out loud, I am source. I remember who I am. I remember who I am. I am source. And I'm source remembering that I'm source. And so it makes this even more profound is the emotions that were attached with it in this very space. And how I describe it is we've seen the movie Notebook, or we've maybe seen this within families who have dementia or some sort of amnesia, where they see photos of family members, but they don't remember them. And maybe they're even in front of a particular family member, and the family member is like, "Don't you remember me, Grandma? I'm such and such." And she's like, "Well, you do look familiar, and there's photos of you all around the house." So the person is like, theoretically or philosophically remembering, well, yeah, this makes sense. And you do look like me. And then there's the moment where that veil lifts for a brief moment in time that all of a sudden they do have the memory because now there's emotion attached. Yes, I remember you. You are my grandchild. You are my husband, or etc. They start to remember the relationship. And it was this moment that I was remembering, not philosophical or theoretically, but I was remembering a true, full, embodied remembrance. And then the minute that I remembered, all of a sudden, like a balloon, it started to deflate. All of a sudden, the light that was illuminated, that was so bright, started to dim. And then all of a sudden, the leaves on the trees and the grass started to go back into full speed. And I'm just sitting there grinning ear to ear, completely drenched in tears with my shirt wet, probably looking crazier than hell because I'm just like, almost like I'm in a spaceship, like looking out and observing this new world and just like leaning fully into the window, like, what is happening? And I'm sure it just, if anyone was observing this from the outside, had to think I was on drugs. But I just sat there for so long in this heightened state of bliss and love and just couldn't even articulate what I was experiencing. So I pulled out my phone and started recording audio exactly what happened. And then I called one of my closest friends. But it took me probably after I crossed the border about 2 hours of driving and just sitting in it and just going, what the hell just happened? What the hell just happened? And it took a little bit of time after that happened to really recognize unity, consciousness, oneness, merging, like what the full experience was. And I wasn't open about this. I didn't talk about this for quite a bit of time. There was a part of the ego that thought, well, I'm special. This is mine. I don't need to share it. And then it took the ego to remove itself from the fear of not being understood or judged, to then say the right people will resonate and hear the message, because it wasn't just my remembering, it's our remembering.
Wow, that that was so profound, and I'm so glad you did share it. I definitely feel like it's something I needed to hear today.
Mhm,
Um, Everything's good, but it's just a really beautiful reminder of
mhm,
that as you said, you touched on earlier, that we are here to have a human experience. So we don't want to spiritually bypass, and we don't want to live in fantasy out, because we do need to kind of have, not fantasy, but what people would call fantasy, which I believe is actually the reality.
yes.
And also, we are in this dense reality for a reason. And so we do have to kind of walk through it so that our souls
Mhm,
can learn what it needs to learn. But thank you for sharing that. It really, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I
mhm,
hope it will make, I believe will make sense to a lot of people, where we kind of remember it ourselves. Like, oh yeah, that does
mhm,
sound right. That does sound like something I remember.
mhm,
And it really does. So I think it's just fascinating that you were able to really have that reflected
Mhm,
to you in a way that you could really understand. And so after the I mean, I know it's a continuing, ongoing thing,
mhm,
right? Where you're living in this world with this understanding. Had you already started doing the work that you're doing, or did that come after all of this as a result, or just even a deeper knowing of
mm,
unity consciousness and wanting to show people that light that you had the privilege of bearing witness to?
mhm. So I had already started doing the work. I was loosely doing the work, um, but in a different level. I was doing it more materialistically in the niche work that I was doing prior in the wine industry. I would work with business developers and would employ some level of coaching in the work that I was doing. And there was also a great deal of curiosity for who people were, and holding space and being very curious for another person is extremely powerful. Being
Mhm.
able to be a listener is extremely powerful. And asking thought provoking questions is extremely powerful, especially when you're a consultant and it's very supportive of your clients. And I, when I had the spiritual awakening and started to have the egoic death, it was letting go of the things that were no longer a part of my purpose or who I was. And what I did hold on to was those aspects of curiosity and really wanting to support people at a deeper level. I just didn't know what it looked like. And as I started doing my own inner work in that place of egoic collapse, in that place of awakening, um, beautiful experiences were happening to me. I was completely blown open. I was afraid to go into a grocery store because I was so sensitive and I was feeling people next to me. I was feeling their emotions. And at this point, I hadn't had the large experience of unity consciousness. And so for me, it felt a little bit scary. And I was just so raw and so open. And there'd be a point where, like, on the trails, I would walk past somebody and they didn't even have to make eye contact. I could almost hear their internal dialogue and feel them and have the sensation of them. And a lot of was sorrow. A lot of people are in a state of grief and pain and suffering, and I could feel it. And so that's why I spent so much time in my house isolating, because I was trying to protect myself because I was so blown open at this point. And so I was doing the inner work for my with myself for myself at a high level. I was working with a therapist, I was working with different other coaches, but I wasn't able to get what it was that I was looking for me. And I continued to do my work alone and started to realize what was supporting me. And then I thought, okay, this is how I want to support other people. I want to support other people who are going through similarly what I am, that are really wanting somebody to go very deep with them on a quantum level, transpersonal psychology, transcendental work, quantum psychology, like really deep on a soul level, to better understand the human experience rather than the human trying to understand the spirit or the soul. That's for me, that is so ass backwards. Like I'm a soul, spiritual being. I want to understand the human from the perspective of the soul rather than immersed as the human being understanding the human being, because that's where we get into the really limited perspective. So as I'm in this space, I'm playing more and more with distance from the ego because I'm already having an egoic death. So then I'm leaning into it more. And then that's when I really started to cultivate and started to understand how I wanted to show up for others. And in my work and in my practice, it's not the end all. This is just a milestone in my path of purpose. It's how I'm showing up and expressing in this moment. But I know that all of this hard work that I've been doing and then the support that I've been offering other people is bringing information back to me to allow me to continue to evolve, because where I'm going and what I'm intended to do in this life is going to look much different. It's going to I believe that I'm going to be working more in systems. I want to bring this work to children, to help support children in creating connectivity rather than separation, so that we start to really heal the children who are relying on gun violence or suicide. Like, there's something bigger and deeper here that I'm moving towards. But right now, I'm supporting clients that are having very similar experiences to what I have had.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I just adore you. I think you just have so much beautiful insight, and I loved what you said about being a soul from a soul perspective, um, learning about the human experience from it's kind of a kind of a meta way
Mhm,
that you said it. Where I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of this. I know you've shared it so many times, and I really appreciate you being willing to share again and
mhm,
to share the wisdom that you have. And I just want to kind of end with asking how people can get in touch with you. You have a podcast as well.
mhm.
Anything that you want to share or talk about in terms of your projects, your services, anything coming up that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I do, I just want to say that, you know, I've told this story numerous times, but all of it's very fragmented, right? There's different aspects of it that come out on different podcasts because of the different questions that are being asked, or maybe there's a specific direction that podcast is wanting to go and has a specific demographic, right? And what I can say about this particular one is it's really allowed me to elaborate and articulate more on the mystical spirit experiences rather than the NDE. And at the end of the day, whether it's an NDE or a mystical experience, these individuals are bringing back wisdom and information to share with the collective. It's not just theirs. So all of that experience and the wisdom isn't just mine, it's all of ours. And if you resonate with what it is that I'm saying, if there's parts of it that feel true and you're like, wow, this really feels like truth, then it's for you. This message is for you. This information is meant for you to also remember that, you are a fragment of source, that, my remembering of who I am is for you to remember who you are, and that you're this beautiful soul having a human experience. And the more that we remember that, and we separate ourselves from the human avatar and believing that we are that human avatar, then we start to surrender and release these beliefs that are tethered to suffering. And there's so many beautiful exercises that are out there for us to really create that separation and become the observer of the human avatar, of this really beautiful work of art that we've chosen to incarnate in, to have this very 3D dense experience. And many of us are caught in this space of suffering and pain and resistance and polarity. And all of that is actually a gift for us to lean deeper into remembering who we truly are. But there's an art to it. There's a really beautiful dance. And there are really beautiful people out there who have started to like figure out the dance, and they've got their own blueprint, and they're here to support you in you cultivating your own blueprint to really learn the dance for yourself. And that's where the podcast comes in. So I started a podcast called Integrating Consciousness, which is really much based on the method that I use when I work with clients. I call it Integrating Consciousness. And so the podcast is a philanthropic endeavor that is to support people who are resonating, who are wanting to do the inner work, who are wanting to become architects of their reality, true creators that are operating at a higher conscious level, so that they're not in a place of victimhood, believing that the world is this painful place that is happening to them. But they actually start to learn their maneuvering and their dancing and their weaving, right? And so the podcast interviews numerous other people in this sector. We call them, if you want to call them healers, service providers, mystics, shamans, teachers, coaches. I interview a plethora of them so far, and all of them, for the most part, donate a service, whether they donate a free coaching session, a book, um, whether they donate apps, whoever they are. One of our mutuals, Betty Guandaniel, was on there, and she donated to some of her private community sessions. So everyone donates in order to support the viewer to have access to a new experience to help them understand if that's the path for them or not. For some people, breath work is the path. For some people, being coached is the path. There's so many different paths. None of them are right. None of them are wrong. They're all what you choose them to be. And so, watching the podcast, all you have to do is leave an authentic, articulated comment in the YouTube channel, and you enter into a raffle, which then supports you in acquiring some of these services. And so, Integrating Consciousness is on YouTube, Spotify, and also Apple Podcast. I highly recommend going to my website, LalaneaFulton.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter. And the newsletter, in my opinion, is a powerful newsletter. It's not just mine, it's community driven as well. And the newsletter helps support you in recognizing what offers are being offered to the community from this group of people that's on the podcast, as well as access to free gifts through the community, wisdom, techniques, skill sets that you can utilize. I have like I want to say it's like a 50, 60 page workbook that soon, I'll be talking about in the newsletter, where you can get access to this. And it's a powerful workbook that I use with my clients. And so it's just a really beautiful way of accessing information to support you on your journey of doing the inner work. And then something else I'd like to say, if this doesn't resonate with you, then there's no need to judge it. There's no need to like get involved in that way. If it doesn't resonate with you, just move on and move past. There's a lot of other information out there that might resonate for you based on currently where you're at. And then if in the future, all of a sudden you find yourself back here, it's a really beautiful synchronistic way of the universe saying, how about now? Does this feel right now? And if it doesn't feel right, there's no need to judge it. You just keep moving and you find something that feels right now. But regardless of where you're at on that journey of finding what resonates, make sure that you ask yourself, is this in alignment with love? Is the underlying message here about empowering me through love and through the greater consciousness and through becoming an architect of my reality? Or is there something here that's making me feel small? Is there something here telling me that I'm not enough, that the world is hard, that it's dark, that everyone out here wants to hurt me? Like, really think about and be discerning about the information that you allow inward, because that's going to dictate how you perceive the world and yourself in it.
Thank you, Lalania. That's I love that. That's all I got to say about that. I loved it. Thank you. I loved having you on. And I just, again, appreciate you so much and
Mhm,
appreciate your time, your energy, and for sharing what you have with me and my listeners. It's so valuable to me. I can speak for myself, and I know it will be for so many
mhm.
others as well. So the gift of your time and energy is just, it's priceless. So thank you again,
Thank you
Lalania.
so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. And I really appreciate being here. And I appreciate all the audience members who made it all the way through this.
me too. Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everybody. Thank you so much for supporting Magic is Real thus far. I appreciate so greatly that you're here. Most importantly, it means a lot to me if this content resonates with you and it is bringing you some sort of peace, joy, hope, inspiration, whatever it is to you. Thank you so much for your likes, your subscribes, your comments, your sharing, talking about the podcast. It really means the world. Just wanted to let you know that there's one other way that you can support the podcast, and that is if you decide to try this product that I take every single morning called Levitin. And it is a super greens powder. I put it in water. It has no sugar, which is really important to me because I can't eat sugar. And it tastes really nice just on its own, just with water. I drink it every morning, and then I don't eat until about 12 or 1. So this kind of detoxifies my system, makes me feel fresh before I even have my caffeine, because it does give me natural energy, which I know is better for me, but I love coffee. So just wanted to run down it with you. It has pea protein, herbs and antioxidants, alkaline superfood antioxidant proprietary blend, super mushroom and digestive enzyme proprietary blend, dairy-free probiotics, tastes beautiful, makes me feel great. I've been on this for about 6 months now, I think, something around that. And I really, really highly recommend it or I wouldn't be here. So if you are interested in trying it out, I don't get a whole lot, but I get a little bit of a little percentage of the sales as well. So that helps me as well as your podcast host who does this as a passion project and gratefully and gladly. But if we can do something nice for you and also support the podcast, then even better. So the link is below, leveden.com. It's my link, my affiliate link, and really appreciate your support in any way that you choose to support the podcast. Thank you so much.